if you look at us as an entertainment product, we're in a much more competitive world when we're trying to get eyeballs and attention and followership. The challenge is with that to stay relevant and to stand out and be seen, and to, what I think what's especially relevant to rugby is to be relevant to that next generation of fan. It's the Gen Zs, and so we've done a huge amount of work on identifying what people like about rugby, what needs to improve with rugby, and what appeals to that next generation of fan. And actually, the interesting thing is that rugby as a product is really attractive to those young fans.
Welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Leaders. We've got a special one here today. We've got the Premiership Rugby CEO, Simon Massie-Taylor. Simon, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you on. We've got a few questions that we'll go through. Of course, eToro and Premiership Rugby have a deal together, which has been ongoing this season, which is great to see. So we can talk a little bit about that, and of course, the plans for you guys and how this season has gone. But a little bit about yourself. I mean, you've worked obviously both in sport right now, but also finance before that. Have you found there are many crossovers with that, similarities? Is there differences? And has it helped, do you think, in the role that you're currently doing?
Yeah, so I started out as an accountant actually, and worked as an investment banker and did mergers and acquisitions. And after leaving, I guess, that sector over 10 years ago, actually coming into sport, there's been so much change within it, including a lot of M&A and a lot of investment from private equity firms and stuff. So I've actually found myself in some cases working with a lot of my ex-colleagues on deals, and so yeah, there's been a natural crossover in life between the two worlds. But I think, generally I'm very grateful for my background in finance. I think it's been incredibly helpful in moving into a wider business world, and it being sport is even more interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And you also hear a lot of people going the other way that have had maybe a career in rugby. You get to your sort of mid-30s, early 40s, and then transition into a role within, in the city. There's certainly been a few roles where people have done that. You've been CEO of Premiership Rugby, I think it's just over 2 years now. How would you describe that time so far? Would you call it a success?
Yeah, I've entered the Premiership at a very challenging time. So I joined in January 2022, and it was just as we were all coming out of the pandemic, and we were still actually had restricted crowds at that point, and restricted travel. But the realities of a post-pandemic world were starting to bite, both in terms of access to debt markets and investments, but also just the post-pandemic economy and then the subsequent recession. And that's after the nightmare that was that 2-year pandemic period. Actually, the real challenges started to bite when everyone started trading again. And so my first, I think, to sum it on one word, I think my first couple of years have been very challenging because I've had to manage that club situation and the consequences of it, which have included 3 of our clubs going into administration. So that was definitely the difficult bit. I think equally it's been very rewarding. I've worked in rugby for over 8 years now. I used to work for the RFU, which is England and Twickenham. And I think actually, despite it being a challenging time, actually being able to be here and make a difference and a change and help, rebuild the sport and hopefully have some firmer foundations, that's rewarding because it's a sport that I love, but it's also important to so many people. And so you feel like you are making a difference. And I think, I'm really proud of the Premiership product and what we have in the league and the brands we have in clubs and the quality of the players we have and the history of the club. So, you feel like you're making a difference there in a world that matters to a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from the outside, it seems like everything's going in the right direction. And I used to play rugby in school, and I've had friends who, well, one of them's playing, championship level rugby now, and I played against people that are playing for England at the moment. And I live in well, I'm not going to say on the podcast just in case there's anyone stalking me, but I don't live too far from Twickenham. So obviously I get a lot of people that come through for the games at the Six Nations or the Autumn Internationals, and there's always such buzz. You're right, it means so much to people. So it's good, at least from my point of view, to see things heading in the right direction. In rugby, how important is it for the teams to get the commercial marketing strategy right? We see American football teams do this very well. And of course, look, the US is a different market, different country. But do you think there's lessons to be learned by what those organizations do?
Yeah, I mean, getting your commercial and marketing strategy right for any organization, frankly, in any sector is essential. But within sport, it's become absolutely essential to know who your customer is, know the value of them, and how to grow. We're in a much more competitive landscape sport-wise than perhaps we were 10 years ago. There's simply more choices for fans when it comes to sports that they choose to follow, and equally there's more distractions on their time, their leisure time more generally. And so we're if you look at us as an entertainment product, we're in a much more competitive world when we're trying to get eyeballs and attention and followership. So the challenge is with that to stay relevant and to stand out and be seen, and to what I think was especially relevant to rugby is to be relevant to that next generation of fan. It's the Gen Zs. And so we've done a huge amount of work on identifying what people like about rugby, what needs to improve with rugby, and what appeals to that next generation of fan. And actually, the interesting thing is that rugby as a product is really attractive to those young fans. We've got a lot of the core parts of it, and it's exciting, it's gladiatorial, it is incredibly athletic as far as the different facets. That it's such a varied sport, isn't it? It's positionally,
Yeah.
and so you've got the super quick, agile people, you've got the unbelievably strong and tough folks, and a combination of both sometimes with the same person, and so that is all really appealing stuff for any fan, especially young fans. And so we're working on being able to articulate that better to people, making it more relevant. So yeah, we do learn a lot from US sports, and it's not just them; it's the challenger sports within our own market. I think cricket has done a good job with 100 to become more relevant to certain demographics and communities. I think women's football has done a fantastic job, and they're on an awesome trajectory. And actually, are a competitor of ours when it comes to attention, given the scale they are now. So all of us have learned from US sports historically. I think the one sort of benefit the US has beyond its scale, and its you can add a few digits onto some of the numbers.
Yeah.
Is it's a lot? There are a lot simpler sports as far as setup, and what I mean by that is probably the biggest thing that is a complicating factor within British sport is the fact that you've not only got domestic competitions, but you've also got international competitions. And sometimes, and a lot of the times, they're managed by separate groups, and so therefore you get a misalignment of interest, a conflict of calendars. And so that's probably the toughest challenge British sports have compared to the simplicity of US sports, where a World Series basically just means something within their own shores.
Yeah, absolutely. It always makes you laugh, doesn't it, when they say champions of the world when someone's won the baseball, the MLB. But always interesting. Obviously, Premiership Rugby operates within a highly competitive sports market. I mean, you just mentioned women's football there. You obviously got men's football. You've got the 100 with cricket. All of these sports, and that's just naming a few, isn't it? What strategies are being employed to grow Premiership Rugby's audience, both on these shores but also internationally?
Yeah, so it's a combination of things. One of them is distribution and media distribution, and obviously that's where your TV rights sit. We're really lucky to have a partner who we've been with since the outset of, as far as BT Sport, it's now TNT. and TNT do a brilliant job in presenting the Premiership.
Yeah.
And when there was a recent acquisition from Warner Brothers Discovery, which owns the TNT brand and basically bought BT Sport. And with that, you're working now with a multinational media and entertainment company who really want to move the product on. So you've got a good core, loyal, well-produced fan base off the back of that distribution, but you also need to appeal to a wider, bigger audience. So that's why in TV terms, we work with ITV, who are a free-to-air broadcaster. And so we have 7 live games with them, including a final at the end of the season. So that's where you get your big crowds, and that's where you start bringing in your casual fans. But then to appeal to the super hardcore, we've had a streaming product that basically puts in all the other games that TNT aren't broadcasting. And so the trick with that is to try and create as seamless narrative as possible with fans. And then on top of that, highlights, clips, and everything. So that distribution's super important. You need to be out there, you need to be relevant. But equally, there's a balance there of a commercial balance around, rights fees that you get from free-to-air broadcasters versus what you get from a pay TV operator like TLT and Sky. And so you need to strike a balance there, which we think we've done quite well. The product is paramount. That's the most important thing. You need to have something that is competitive, which we've got. And part of the beauty in the Premiership is the unpredictability of it. We could be in our 6th season of a 6th different winner of the Premiership, which is pretty incredible. We have measures within our league to make things competitive. One of them is the salary cap, so therefore you can't exceed a certain paying level, which gives us a more even playing field. And so statistically, that means that we have the highest proportion of close games, i.e., that comes within a try margin or a converted try margin. So that's really important. Jeopardy and excitement and closeness to games is really important. A better calendar is important. So we talked a bit about overlaps with internationals, and so this season is the first time we're not overlapping with the international calendar, which is where you lose some of your audience. But also we've worked hard on what we sort of call tentpole marquee moments, where it's a long season, but then there needs to be really clearly defined big moments. And for example, one of them for us was a derby weekend. So every game was a derby, local derby. That creates a huge amount of buzz and atmosphere, and we're looking to do more of those next year. The Christmas fixtures is a massive family moment and something that we have dialed up this year. Then you get your big marquee games in big stadia. So Twickenham, for example, with Quins. Tottenham Stadium with Saracens, which again appeals to this big audience. So these tentpole moments and that product and that season are important. And then it gets into the detail of things like fan engagement, where you're constantly trying to have a direct relationship with a fan. And so you can do that with certain activations and tools. So, for example, we launched a fantasy product this year, which has been incredibly popular with our core fans. We have an app. And obviously there's a sort of the higher up the funnel, there's a constant need to acquire more social followers. And another key bit on the marketing strategy is the players. That's absolutely core. They're something that we've under indexed with as far as player profile, and so we've worked hard to put some platforms in place so that they increase their profile and become promoters of the sport. So, for example, we're at the company called Greenfly, who basically are a content platform for players' social platforms. And so they can more easily put great content about themselves, their team on there. And also it's a commercial opportunity for them. So that's key. And then I'd say the sort of final thing is around partnership. And this is when you sort of go back to the point around us living in a fragmented sports world, because you've got Six Nations, you've got the England team, you've got the league, you've got... And so we're working much closer together with the RFU as far as joint marketing agreements. We work much closer with Six Nations and URC, which is our sort of Celtic cousin, because we've all got the same challenge. We're trying to grow the sport. And so we're working much closer. In fact, we work in the same offices as Six Nations and URC now. So we're trying to bring things together. So I think those are the big levers when it comes to trying to compete in what you say is a competitive sports market.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, all of that sounds great. The thing that really stood out to me, which I love, is about helping the players. promote themselves, become these stars, because that's in a way what it's about. I know you're going to have your fans, the UK teams that follow their teams religiously, and I don't necessarily really have a specific side that I follow. I look for players. I want to see where your Finn Russells are playing, how they're playing, what's Marcus Smith up to as well, and they are the stars, aren't they? And of course, there's many other players, but I found that was interesting. My best mate, one of my best mates, is a school teacher at Grey Court in Kingston, and they recently had, along with all the other schools, the rugby sevens at Rosslyn Park. And I don't know if it's been happening every year, but certainly not when I was playing, but it was like broadcasted live on YouTube, which I thought was great as well. It does seem like from the grassroots level, I know that's not Premiership Rugby, but everything's sort of just slowly starting to come together, and I imagine the rewards will be reaped down the line. A question just about the rugby players themselves. I mean, how significant is the restriction that English rugby players, that they must play their club rugby in England to maintain eligibility for the national team? You know, would allowing English players to compete abroad without risking those international careers potentially increase income, maybe through transfer fees, and thereby, I guess, it could support club finances and revenue? Is that a question you could answer?
Yeah, I mean, unlike football, the sort of transfer fee market doesn't exist within rugby. You know, it's not like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's I mean, sometimes an unpopular view. I appreciate it, but actually, my two key. If you look at the English rugby system, which needs to have the most competitive, vibrant English Premiership, Gallagher Premiership, and also the most competitive England team, having our players play in the Gallagher Premiership is really important. So it's key for us to say to fans, to broadcasters, to everyone, commercial partners, that all the best English talent is playing in the Gallagher Premiership. You know, that is really important, and is why it's of such a high quality. Secondly, and it's more of a performance thing for England, we in England are a competitive, despite the abundance of talent, we're a competitive disadvantage because we don't have centrally contracted players. They're committed to their clubs, but they're also playing in a higher volume of clubs compared to some of our competitor unions. You know, so for example, you know, Scotland, there's 2 teams, and you know, Ireland, 4, etc. And so therefore, one of the key components of a successful team is cohesion. So time together, right? And it's especially relevant within rugby due to the sort of specialist nature. You know, there's a lot of studies that have been done around the importance of cohesion, and so really for to sort of combat that inherent sort of weakness that we have around, you know, the disparate number of teams we have, time with players and access to players and the ability to influence training programs, and it is really important. It's part of our relationship with the RFU, and it's something that we're looking to evolve more. So it's, you know, I think the point to make here is that I think it would be different if we weren't a competitive environment when it comes to player salaries. Now, appreciating there's been quite a state of flux because of certain clubs going bust and people having almost no choice to go abroad. Actually, if you look at us versus France, which is our obvious competitor, you actually look at the average salaries and even sort of the top 10, top 20, top 40 salaries, and they're pretty similar. And so when you balance that out with the amount that they can earn for England appearance fees, we're not uncompetitive. And I think it would be different if we were. Probably not the most popular view with certain players and certain fans, but actually equally, it's so important to the Premiership in England.
Yeah, no, complete makes sense. I think I saw recently that Rishi Sunak announced 35 million invested into grassroots and state school cricket development, which is obviously great for that sport. Do you know if there are any plans for Premiership Rugby to support the growth of the game in state schools, which is obviously a massively untapped market for clubs? There's a big sort of leaning, isn't there, I think, towards, certainly for the England team, the majority come from private schools, which is obviously fine, absolutely. But I wonder if there's an untapped market there with state school boys and women and girls.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is more of a governing body RFU thing, but we have a massive vested interest there as far as talent ID and also the diversification of our fan base. A lot of good work has been done by the RFU in the last 10 years. There was a great Rugby World Cup legacy program back in 2015 called All Schools, which expanded out to, I think, and impacted close to a million state and secondary modern school pupils over a course of a number of years. So the ability to tap into that is key. As part of our agreement with the RFU going forward, we're going to work together on a grassroots program that helps grow in targeted areas. But it's essential because not only the future players, but also the future fans of the game. And there's a lot of analysis that's been done around, if you get into a sport before the age of 14, either through participation or just being exposed to it, then you become a fan. You're a much higher chance of becoming a fan for life. So another reason why it's so important, as you highlight.
Yeah, absolutely. Sponsorship deals are crucial for the financial stability of sports leagues globally. Can you discuss any new partnerships or sponsorship agreements that are in the sort of the pipeline for Premiership Rugby?
Yeah, we've expanded our partnership portfolio quite a lot over the last few years, and for each of the partners, it's always been focused around a certain part of our marketing plan, and also a lot of it around innovation as well. So, for example, eToro have come on board and have got are supporting a lot of the predictor tools that we do and the insights that we give, which we know fans like. So we've invested a lot in that, and eToro is supporting that. Another good small example here is that Christopher Ward, a timing partner of getting involved in supporting our shot clock, which reduces the time which kickers can take their kick. So again, we're trying to improve what's on the pitch and trying to bring partners along the way with it. But we've also, because of the community, and we talked about the fans and the loyal following that rugby has and Premiership have, partners like Funding Circle, who support community businesses, and a lot of there's a lot of small SMEs that work with rugby clubs, and part of that whole ecosystem. They're doing a lot of work around that. And then Gallagher, our title partner, over the course of I think now 7 years, has built a really authentic business community around rugby through their partnership, which is doing really well for them. And then you've got partners like London Pride, who bring a huge amount of value to our final and activate a huge amount around that. So it's pretty broad, and it's broadening our partnership portfolio. And as you say, it's very important commercially as well.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple more questions. One just about the Prem, and then we'll touch upon the Championship briefly. Do you think, in a way, I know obviously with the clubs that were removed from the league a couple of years ago, is sad. But do you think, in a way, it's a bit of a blessing in disguise that there's now less games for the players themselves, because it's an incredibly brutal sport at times, isn't it? It's so intense. It's a congested calendar. Do you think, in a way, there's a bit of a silver lining there, perhaps?
I think it's hard to describe the 3 clubs going into administration as any sort of positive, really, because the difficult thing to come to terms with is that because you don't control those brands, which Wasp is one of the greatest rugby brands, and it therefore that business technically goes into the hands of the administrator and goes into a potential sort of twilight zone. That's really hard to sort of get to grips with as a rugby fan, and frankly, but then also they're important parts of our fabric of rugby and need to have a place within it again. And we can sort of talk about that again with the second tier and everything. So I think that's hard to get to grips with. But I think what it has pointed towards is almost a sort of commercial reality that our system can only sustain a certain number of clubs and a certain number of players as well. And I think whilst it has been brutal that essentially there's been a natural reduction of our player base, there is absolutely no doubt that the quality of that player base is a lot better. And so that market has tightened, and the best players are still getting paid, as well. In fact, sometimes better than they were previously. But it's just really concentrated that talent, and so therefore, again, as a product, that quality has gone up. No doubt, there's no doubt about that. And we're this weekend is a European quarterfinal weekend, and we've got 3 English teams in that, and so. We're competing at the highest level, despite where our salary caps are and everything else, which aren't necessarily as competitive as the French. So I think that is there is a positive out of that becoming a 10-team league, and then you go into the player welfare point, and I think it's a reality that our sport is tough and it's getting tougher, and so therefore there's a finite amount of time and capacity players have to. Number of games they can play in a season, really, and perform at the highest level. And so I think, a shorter calendar, which is what it is now, which is more concentrated for fans, isn't conflicted with the international schedule, I think is a positive and is starting to bear fruit.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I really am. On the Championship, do you know if there's a plan to make it more commercially viable product, television rights, all of that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that the Championship's got a long way to go, and the second tier's got a long way to go, because there is a gap, big gap between the 2 leagues, and ideally you want a free flowing sort of 2-tier system, which also is a way to get the Wasp brand, the London Irish brand, the Worcester brand into top flight. I think there's a reality around the amount of money that's in the system to support that growth.
Yep.
The RFU are in negotiations with the Championship now about funding for the next cycle, and that will improve and that will help things. We play a role in supporting the Championship in helping promote it. We're already playing a integrated Premiership Cup between Prem teams and Championship teams. So we played that this season. Ealing got to the semi-finals actually, which was great, and narrowly lost to Leicester Tigers. So we're encouraging a higher performance experience for Championship clubs through things like that. And we're also, we have got the ability for Championship clubs to get promoted into the Premiership. They need to meet standards. They need to play a playoff, and the standards, are rightly high. But I think that so I think we do need to. It's a long path. It's moving in the right direction. And the vision has to be that we've got not only 10 strong Premiership teams, but up to 10 Championship teams that are regionally well spread, so that we can have a good professional rugby story.
Yeah, no, for sure. Final question, Simon. Thank you very much for your time. If we fast forward a few years, without wanting to wish time away, of course, what needs to happen from here on out for you to say, in my role, this has been a great success?
Yeah, I think we're in a phase which will take time, but I think the ultimate indicators of success here are new club investment. I think that's important that we start to bring on a new wave of club investors, and I believe that will happen. And a lot of the things we're putting in place will make that more attractive, but it's going to be a lot of work still. Winning teams in Europe and winning England team are important for the whole system as part of our partnership with the RFU. So I think that's another key indicator of success. But I think ultimately it's almost ensuring that rugby is relevant to my daughter's generation. Right? So if as long as they and their friends understand what rugby is, appreciate it, and fans and followers of it, and aren't sort of turning around saying, "What was rugby? I've never heard of it." Then I think we've done a good job. So yeah, that's probably the signs of success. Whether my girls think that Dad's got a cool job, or whether he's just working for something totally irrelevant.
Yeah,
there we go.
Well, look, Simon, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on board. Thank you.